And so, as Gary mentioned, what we're talking about tonight is it's not just about the numbers, but rather how do you get people engaged? And growing an engaged TRIO chapter is a real challenge. I was co-founder with Elizabeth Rubin of the TRIO Philadelphia chapter 25 years ago, and have been president of TRIO now for a little more than 10 years, and certainly been involved with a lot of different chapters, helping them get their members engaged. So they're not just coming to meetings, but rather they're supporting the mission of TRIO, and that's what it's all about. So as we go through with this, there'll be plenty of opportunity for discussion, and you are meant to be engaged in that discussion. So when the opportunity presents itself, if you would mute yourself during the presentation, and then just remember when you're ready to participate to unmute yourself. And so the concept is we in the past have always felt attendance grows out of engagement. But in our lifetime, even in growing effective organizations, attendance has become an established path to engagement. The big idea was this: come and eventually you'll get engaged. You can certainly relate to that. And so, I'm sorry, I'm keeping an eye up there for people waiting. Gary, you should watch that and I'll stop watching it. But in an area in today's era, in all organizations, if you look around your community, you certainly will see it there too. People aren't coming to meetings. Their non-members are constantly on the rise, and even members don't attend meetings as often anymore. So that strategy of attendance leading to engagement is really not working today. And I'm trying to see why I'm not forwarding my, oh, there we go, okay. And so many groups are still counting on people attending, hoping it will drive engagement. But as you look around, not only at your own chapter, but the organizations around you, we're all facing the same challenge. The shelf life of that strategy is limited because the number of people who want to attend meetings drops every year. Those of you who've seen the Masons, the Elks, your church, I mean, you just name the organization, and they're all challenged, as we are in our own chapters, getting people out. So in the future, attendance won't drive engagement, but rather engagement will drive attendance. And so that's our key message. The goal will become to get people engaged faster and to engage people more deeply in the true mission of your chapters. In the future, the engaged will attend because, in large measure, only the engaged will remain. And if you look at many chapters around you, and I can't say in your individual chapter that this may be the story, but in those chapters that have narrowed down to just a few, it's the engaged people that are still there. And so let me ask you for the first engagement discussion, why are you still attending your chapter events? And I'm going to use my screen here that I can see. I've got two screens, so I can see you. I don't know if you can see the members or not. Bill, you've been a regular attendee and you still are. Why do you come to meetings and events?
Because you make me.
That's not true. You know that because we don't have control over our people. But
I was just seeing if people were paying attention. No, listen, it's all part of the whole advocacy, and giving back, right? So it just makes sense. I got involved in TRIO right after my transplant, right after I learned what it was all about. I was getting all caught up in all the acronyms, UNOS and TRIO and all that. And, I just really felt the need to get plugged in to be able to share my story and help other people, right?
Now, people don't know Bill as I do. And Bill would be my evidence of getting somebody involved and how they then become so engaged that they become our future leaders. And so that challenge of succession planning even is
But,
the
you
challenge
know,
we all face. And
actually, Bill's joke, if I could just interject, Jim, Bill's joke actually has an element of truth to it. You know, there's an old fundraising saying that people don't give to causes, people give to people. And I do think that the fact that TRIO chapters can have a really strong sense of community can really reinforce somebody attending meetings on a regular basis. I think the friendships, you know, Bill was making a joke, but the fact that you two are friends can really mean a lot in terms of keeping people engaged and involved.
And that's part of the mission that our chapters and TRIO has, right? That social engagement and support of patients. Chris, how about yourself? Why are you still attending your events? You came back into this and now you're a chapter president. Why?
Yeah, you know, when I really got more involved with TRIO, it's when I left the transplant center and was working in industry. So I'm a nurse by background, right? And I missed that interaction. I missed the people and I missed the interaction and I missed everything that came along with it. And so being a part of TRIO kept me connected.
So it's that purpose and people. Okay. Marty and Michelle, you guys started things down there, then you retired and you came back. Why are you still attending your events and meetings and so forth?
Well, I had heard that there was a free dinner coming to the house tonight.
You mean they delivered to the wrong house?
Meeting, but I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding. We'll see you folks later.
Michelle, why do you give of your time?
Well, at this point in time, you know, we started on this in 2012, dealing, you know, talking to you and trying to put a chapter together because we thought it was a void here in our market with two great transplant centers. And, you know, I went through Marty's transplant, which was a total surprise and an ordeal and a miracle that it ever worked out. And I would have loved to have had a place to go, to know of a place, to people to talk to, just to feel normal, just to have some of those questions answered, because the doctors can't answer all your questions. They've never had a transplant. So that was kind of always the driving force for me, from my perspective.
That got you in the door. That got you in the door. And here it is 9 years later, and you're still actively engaged. How come? Why aren't you sitting back and relaxing? I mean, at that stage of life.
Well, we really haven't found people that will really step in. And, you know, we're hoping to get to 10 years. We're not that young anymore. So we might not be doing this for a whole lot longer, but we would like to get to 10 years. We think it's important. We still have core members of our group that come every year, that have been here with us for the whole journey. We have other members and attendees. They come for a year or so and then they trade out, new members come in. So there's always that influx of new people, but there's that core group. And it is a little bit like a family. Everybody misses seeing each other. It's a nice time when we have a meeting on a Saturday morning when we can get together. But we've put so much effort into it. And our hospitals are so grateful. We're just not ready to give up. I complain a bit because I do a lot of the work. And there's days when I really don't want to do that work. I have other stuff going on in my life and my family. But you know, we're just not ready to let the whole thing fall apart, which we think might happen when we step away.
Okay. Hey, Mike, why are you still coming to the Kansas City TRIO chapter events?
Basically, you know, as president, I feel it's my responsibility to do it. But number two, I do it because I like socializing with the people that show up, whether it be on Zoom or whether it be in a personal, because we started out as a support group, and I myself started out in TRIO 3 years before my transplant. I was one of the lucky people to be able to join it and find out, hey, this is what I'm going to be facing. This is what I'm going to be looking at. Because the first year before I joined a transplant, I was starting to get rather scared because I waited 4.5 years for a heart. But anyway, during the last 3.5, I had a lot of support, and my wife had a lot of support, which, as you all know, going through a transplant, the caregiver needs a lot of support too. So I keep going to do that, and I keep going to support other people that come into our group because we like to give that support to the people that have just been listed if we can get a hold of them and get them interested. And sometimes we do, and sometimes don't. Sometimes we don't get them 3 years out. Sometimes we get them like 2 weeks. We'll be talking to a guy 1 month, and then the next month, oh my God, he's up in the ICU, and we'll say, hey, let's all go see him. Okay. So we'll all go do a night visit if his, staff and his wife or whoever's in there think that's a doable thing. But anyway, that's why I do it. I do it, and it's very rewarding to be able to do these things and to pay back.
I have to add, much like Michelle and Marty, your wife is very supportive and engaged also. So as opposed to distancing in that relationship, it actually brings you two together, doesn't it?
Sure. Yep.
Steve, you've been associated with TRIO for how many years, and why are you still attending? Unmute yourself before you start talking. Unmute yourself. There you go.
I've had 2 liver transplants, and I'm getting close to 30 years.
Wow.
I still find value, and I enjoy meeting people who are basically in the same boat. And I'm fascinated by how the technology has changed. And the newer people always have stories that I'm so surprised at how quickly they get out of the hospital.
Amy, how about yourself? How are you related to TRIO and why?
So compared to what I've heard so far, I'm a newbie. I've been with TRIO Greater Cleveland for just about 2 years. And I got involved after I had a kidney transplant and just felt like I had felt better. I wanted to give back and get involved with the community, the transplant community in the Cleveland area. So I was looking to join a transplant group and chose TRIO. I'm also a liver transplant coordinator at Cleveland Clinic.
Really?
So I can kind of bring both the personal and professional aspect to the group. So yeah, and I just wanted to share, I really, I'm passionate about education and really want to just try to help whoever needs the help in our transplant community.
That's probably a common thread that many people relate to. Our mission is one of service, and what keeps coming back is that dedication to service. Hey, Rose, there you are up in San Francisco, the new chapter president, been around that chapter for a long while. Why do you keep coming back, and why did you take on this new role?
Hi, everyone. Let's see. Well, I was a kid when I got started, so I didn't have a choice. But TRIO and the members kind of became my family over the years. So that's why I keep coming back, is because it's family, and that those relationships that I think we talked about a little bit before, those formed relationships. And then I think looking back on some of those earlier days, it was really the support, right? It was the support for my family member, my mom, who needed a transplant. And I think once she got her transplant, she was so happy and grateful that she wanted to help and give back as much as she could to help ensure other people could get the same, the same thing, and then have that same support too. So a lot of the things we've already talked about, but
you bring out that other driving force of gratitude. So often our donor is unknown. How do you say thank you? A lot of people join TRIO and stay with TRIO because it's a way of expressing that gratitude by helping others in their own journey. Bethany from New York City, Manhattan. What keeps you coming, Bethany?
So that's an interesting question, and I do ponder that from time to time. It's been a lot of work this last month in particular. We have Donate Life Month coming up, which is our St. Patrick's event every year, and last year it was canceled because of COVID. We had to not do this. We usually have 1,100 people at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue, recipients and donor families. That is our signature event. This year, we're trying to figure out how to get it done virtually, how to try and get part of it funded, so that we'll be able to continue doing it. I am a newbie as well. I am, in addition to Amy there, I'm 3 years with the organization. I really, my relationship to transplantation is working with the OPO and making friends and meeting recipients and donor families through that relationship. And the long-term members, the long-time board members there, I guess that there was kind of a lull. There wasn't really leadership, but there were these board members that kind of wanted to support and wanted to move things forward. And that's why they asked me to step in at that point 3 years ago. And I do have the same passion for education that Amy, was talking about, and just having these people feel like that they're in a part of a community, especially here in the city right now, with the turmoil that we've had going on during this pandemic and the whole Black Lives Matter movement. It takes on a very different dimension here, trying to get people engaged and trying to get community engaged and have them interested in what our education programs about and our meetings are about. And I hope I answered the question.
You did, Bethany. That it's all about relationships, and I think that's important for us to realize. Every one of us actually is inspiration for others as we offer service. Pat, unmute yourself and tell us more from Akron Canton, another Ohio chapter. And I know you've been challenged recently in terms of replacing leadership and so forth. So what keeps you coming?
Well, of course, I'm involved being a liver transplant for 17 years. And I didn't get into TRIO immediately, but I've been there probably at least 10 or 12 years. And I loved our leaders and our president and vice president. And I liked the camaraderie. We did not have a whole bunch of new members over the years. We more or less lost most of them. And in 2020, we lost the treasurer. Thank goodness we had transferred the funds into another person, happened to be me. And we lost our vice president and past president and co-presidents. Walter Hinkle died this year, as did Rich Scalera, who was doing the computer thing. There's only at this point 2 active members. Our secretary and myself were we actually spent time with Gary Green, thank you so much, last week, or was it only this week? I don't even remember. Reestablishing our internet because we had no way for people to contact us. We have set up a Zoom meeting on our regular meeting night, the third Tuesday of the month, starting next month. We're hoping that we can get some people that we know as transplant members to come in on Zoom. I know some of them were, I don't want to drive that far, or I'm afraid to go out with COVID, or any excuse will do type of thing.
But Pat, let me interrupt you. Right? What you're describing is a lot of stuff, but what about you? Why did you stay with it? Why are you still attending the events, and why are you still in that leadership role? You personally.
Personally, because there's about $4,500 in the account that we don't know what to do with. And second, I think it's a very worthwhile program. There are people out there who are drifting, who have had or who are planning to have transplants. I have a friend who works at Sam's Club. He's going to Mayo Clinic, but he has kind of issues. So, I talk to him and I try to help him, but the group would be much better to do that. So I have a personal involvement, and I kind of like the idea of being there for people who need us. And also, I'm a nurse like half of us are, and right, Chris? And we have this need to be wanted and to be helpful to other people. And this is what I think TRIO can do.
Very good. Thank you, Pat. That's very personal. Sam, if you unmute yourself, answer the same question.
I basically do it to honor the donor family. Before transplant, I didn't know much. I didn't have this sort of support. So I wanted to be sure to provide it for other people, education and, just being there for them. Questions, so when I joined TRIO Maryland, that's what I got out of it. I was able to interact with people and I enjoy that. And, I learned a lot. I'm still learning. So that's why I keep doing it. It's a passion.
And Sam has taken on the challenge of trying to resurrect a chapter that's gone inactive over the years, as its membership have aged out and some former leaders have moved away. And so he has a big challenge in front of him. That takes a lot of commitment, a lot of engagement to take on that role. And so, Sam, I appreciate that. Your webinar last night was a lot of fun. Sorry it wasn't a bigger audience, but for the audience there, it was very engaging. That's what it's all about. Lorinda, unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Lorinda comes from Oklahoma. Some of you don't know we have a chapter in Oklahoma. Lorinda, why did you start a chapter in Oklahoma? And later on, we're going to get more into your engagement.
Okay, so Lorinda Gray Davis, and I am 2.5 years post-liver transplant, and I got involved 6 months with the national board after my transplant. So it was 2 years in January, and I do it because I've always been an advocate. I've always been in the diversity, minority, women-owned business field in construction. So I have a voice. I know how to use it, and I figured what a better way. I found a new passion. So that's it.
Okay. I think what we just heard in some very personal sharings is examples of why engagement is so critical and how that gives you what you're looking for in terms of people who are truly supportive and doing what it takes to make a chapter successful. And so getting back to our slide deck, trying to attract people in today's culture sometimes can work against the mission. And while making the meeting attractive, whether that's with refreshments or a better site or hoping people will come, sometimes gets diminishing results. But when attendance was more normal, and in some cases automatic in our culture, attraction was a decent strategy. But it's different today because people would go to meetings. Creating a better environment was a good approach. But here's what happens. It also feeds into consumerism. And what we see today is a lot of people saying, well, what's in it for me? Why should I do this? Why should I pay dues to be part of a chapter? And that is a question that bothered me for a number of years early on until I realized they're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, what does TRIO do for me? But rather, how can I use TRIO to give back, to serve others? And so moving away from consumerism, building something attractive and people will come, really works against the idea of that giving that we're really looking to do as part of the TRIO mission. All right, there we go. So years ago, it was normal. Everybody came to their organizations, and think of your own community organizations that were so popular in our youth, and depending upon your age, you know what I'm talking about. More and more, those organizations today are complaining because people aren't joining. And you don't need to look around just at your chapter, but look at your local community and see what's happening there. And you realize that this whole culture has changed. So in the process, building an attractive, relevant meeting has had an unintended side effect. People have come to evaluate the organization by what they get out of it, not by what they put into it. And that's a big mistake. Along the way, membership has been redefined in many circles to mean consumption of knowledge. The more you know, the more mature you are, and that's a flawed approach too. The goal is not to know, but to do something with what you know. And so authentic membership has always been about giving far more than about getting. And I don't know what's happening here, that the slides aren't moving the way they normally would. There we go. And so in today's world, working against the mission that way, as I just described, anyone who knows TRIO chapters knows that the heart of every attraction organization is a core of members who sacrifice, who give, who serve, and who invite. What's exciting is that selflessness in the days to come will move to the forefront in the future, because those who remain, and you are among those who remain, will be engaged in the mission. So our culture, our society, I think, is ripe for an alternative to consumerism. One of the frequent criticisms we hear of groups today is that we're self-indulgent and hypocritical. Those are not without warrant in some organizations. As a more selfless organization emerges, these are excellent selfless ones, that will drive more curiosity and interest from unengaged people and bring them toward us. While you can debate what millennials really want out of life, and there's all sorts of conversation about that, there appears to be a growing attraction in our culture to rebel against consumerism, as the minimalist movement of the last few years has shown us. People are looking for an alternative to life as they know it, a service organization. Your TRIO chapter can be that alternative. Grateful recipients obsessed with giving service through their extended lives trump those obsessed with themselves and their preferences. And so people become the most passionate about the things which they're most involved. And so a final reason that engagement will drive future chapter growth is simply this. People become most passionate about the things with which they're most involved. Just talk to a football dad or a mom, baseball mom, or your foodie friend who just found yet another recipe, or your triathlete friend who set another personal best. Engagement fuels involvement. Involvement fuels passion. And passion gets people to reach out to others to share that passion. They invite others. That's why your friend wants to try that recipe, to watch the game with them, and at least attempt a 5K in Bill's case. Engagement leads to invitation. Invitation leads to newly engaged people actively supporting our TRIO mission. In so many ways, this can be a very good thing. And so a focus of what I'm trying to say is exactly that, and repeating it. Engagement fuels involvement. Involvement fuels passion, and passion fuels invitation. If you want to see your chapter grow, stop trying just to attract people and start trying to engage people. Amy's house, that you've seen in our monthly newsletter recently, is the dream of the leadership of the Central Texas group. And they got everybody involved, and now they have a house that's housing transplant patients. What an amazing engagement that group has had in raising money, in getting that house built, and opening it up. So think about this and share, as you will, in your local chapter, and look broadly at your local community. What are you seeing about that decades-old use attendance to drive engagement strategy? Think about that. And as you will unmute yourself, raise your hand, however you want to do it, so that we can see you. And let me stop that share so that we can see you. And so the old idea of bring them in, sit back in a meeting and watch what goes on, how is that changing in your world? Or how have you seen it change? Or how do you want it to change?
Well, obviously you can't bring them in anymore. So we've got to do things like Zoom meetings to get people's attention.
Okay. And so just having information, though, is not going to get them engaged. They sit passively back. One of the things that I'm trying to do, even in this presentation, this Zoom event, is not let you sit back and reaching out and say, go ahead, Bethany, what did you want to engage and say? Unmute yourself and say what you were going to say.
Thank you for the reminder to unmute. Yes, so we've been doing meetings via Zoom since last March, and it was interesting at first. Because of the newness of the situation, I think everybody wanted to be there, wanted to come on and wanted to hear information, but it has become more challenging. There's just so much else out there. There's so much going on in that world of Zoom that people can go to and visit and be a part of. So even if you're having, top transplant surgeons or top speakers in the world of palliative care, despite the subject, it still is a challenge to really get the kind of attendance at meetings that I was accustomed to prior to the pandemic.
Hey, Sam, unmute yourself and let me ask you a question. Sam is Mr. Webinar. He goes to all of them and he gets engaged. Tell him how you get engaged with those webinars. You're not just sitting back watching, but what are you doing?
So I try to engage through if they have a chat. I start asking questions and engage people. If I see somebody I know, I'll say hello and start something, and there'll be a topic people will talk about, and then ask questions if there's an opportunity, because that itself engages people.
Okay, and that chat opportunity, if you're hosting a Zoom event, you need somebody to pay attention to that, because you're busy engaging, as I am right now with you. If I'm not able to watch the chat to see if there's things coming out. Go ahead,
I can
Bethany.
multitask pretty well.
Bethany,
I can
I'm sorry,
multitask.
say it again.
I multitask pretty well. I do this an awful lot, and I'm pretty good at it.
That's what you need to do. You're right. It's one thing having a chat feature available. It's another thing using it effectively. And we've all seen those Zoom events where they've got a chat going on, but nobody is bringing that into the interaction of the meeting. And so that's a challenge. Hey, Lorinda, unmute yourself and tell us your claim to fame down there for your growing chapter, your new growing chapter, is all about the support groups. And that's certainly an example where you can't be just a presenter like I'm presenting to you now, but rather it's engaging people. How do you do that using technology to really create a support group?
How much time do you got? I don't really need a lot of time.
We'll give you 2 minutes for now.
No, so, the main thing is having a primary purpose. So my primary purpose for TRIO Oklahoma is so I'll read it to you. So our preamble that we've made up is, this is the Oklahoma chapter of Transplant Recipients International Organization, our support group. Our primary purpose is to help pre and post-transplant patients. We ask that when we share in the room, it's confidential, judgment-free, and we want you to be we want you to be comfortable enough to share your experience, strength, and hope that it helps someone else. And so when you have a pre-transplant patient in there, saying someone that's 10 years out or 5 years out, their hope is there. They have that hope. And when you get those conversations, tonight I left the meeting early and someone took over. And tonight was about reassurance. What reassures you? And we do have a pre-transplant coordinator that jumps in on our meeting every week. We have a dietitian that jumps in because the dietitian, her husband had a kidney transplant, but the pre-transplant coordinator does it because she said she's learned more about transplants than she ever has being a transplant coordinator by sitting in our meetings. Our meetings are every Thursday, 6:30 to 7:30. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday, I'm on there. And I always have at least 16 to 18 people. And I just actually had someone contact me from high school yesterday because his wife's getting ready to go through a transplant. So people are reaching out to us right and left because of that organic thing that we have going on. And something that I never thought about that I think is needed is a separate group, which we're going to go into Zoom rooms, because I think you need to have a women's support group and a men's support group, because there's things in transplant pre-transplant that men might want to talk about, but they don't want to share it with, women in the room. And there's things that women want to talk about, they may not necessarily share with a man in a room. And so those are things that people just don't think about, when you're looking at that. And then you got a caregiver side. So it's really getting involved with that support, not someone coming and talking, but having people talk to each other is what I.
And so
Sorry,
your
I'm a little
meetings are-
passionate about it.
Your meetings are truly support group meetings, which is a different challenge to use technology, as you just described, to allow people to be engaged, separating them into separate meeting rooms, which is technology, to allow them then to be comfortable and open up and be more engaged. So again, another example of that getting people engaged. Sam, you had your hand up.
And we call it a peer-to-peer.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Lorinda. I think because of COVID and everything, we have an opportunity here to do things differently, especially with technology, Zoom and things like that. And we do need to do more of the support group activities, not just having speakers and stuff, because that engages people. And that's why in some Zoom sessions where, chat is not enabled, it becomes a little bit of an issue because people are there just sitting and listening. And we should make it like as if they're in the same room. So at least have a chat available. Of course, there's a risk where people just won't pay attention, but maybe for part of the session, open up chat or, let people talk after the speakers are done or something like that. That's just been my experience.
And yet your webinar yesterday, while one reaction would be disappointment because more people didn't come out to it.
Right.
At the same time, because you had a small audience, you got everybody engaged in that. You had speakers sharing stories, but they were engaging with their story. And you moderated it in a way that allowed people to not just sit back and listen to the story, but rather to be engaged in that. So you've turned, in that particular case, I would say you've turned a negative into a very strong positive. And that lends itself to what Lorinda is talking about. I'm sure some of the support group meetings don't have 20 people, thank God, but rather you have those few that need that opportunity to engage with each other. And so,
yeah, and I also, sorry, James. So I also have an idea. Maybe I think Lorinda uses breakout rooms and things like that. So when you have an organization like Trio, when you have different transplant recipients, you could have sessions where all the kidneys go off to a room or things like that, and then ask questions to each other, learn from each other, and things like that. It's all possible.
Yes, Lorinda.
The thing is that we want to talk about transplants, but really about organs. But it's really about a transplant. It's about the understanding that someone else has gone through it. And it's about people talking about how they feel. It's not necessarily about the process sometimes. Sometimes it's just about, what? I've had a bad week, and this is why. And that's where you get the connection. And that's why people come back.
And
they look forward to it.
And that's going to cause you to have different types of meetings. I mean, every meeting doesn't have the same framework. And given a support group, which is different than a general business meeting, for example. Rose, you wanted to contribute?
Oh, I like what Lorinda just said. It's about people, right? So wherever we are, like, how can we talk to each other and support each other as people? And then also, I mean, in this space, like, we're from all over the country. And so in our meetings, we have people that live 100 miles away from each other too, but they're still in California. And so it's like, oh, well, are you, it's also talking about the differences there. Like, oh, is there something different in your county? I think the last meeting we had, we were talking about vaccinations, and someone was saying, oh, I'm in this county and you're in that county, and how do we do this? And so I think that's another thing that, because we're in Zoom, we can really utilize being in different places as well to help learn more.
I think it's critical to use technology in the right way. I mean, you can misuse technology and just making it something that is a bunch of screens and you're still just sitting back listening to something. That's not engagement. But it does present those opportunities as various people have suggested. And before we move on to the next slide, Bethany, go ahead.
Yes, I do agree with what Sam was saying and what you are saying as well, Jim, about having more conversation along with the meeting topic. We've been doing better with that. We're making it kind of a hybrid meeting. So we have a speaker, but we allow the conversation beforehand. And then we have conversation afterhand to kind of get that support group piece that Lorinda's talking about going, and that has been helpful. But to me, I'm used to looking at 60 people attending a meeting, and I'm not having that kind of volume, on our Zoom meetings. And I was just hearing Lorinda saying like 16 people. What is the normal? What's the range of participation in this among the other chapters?
How many patients do you get out to a support group, Lorinda, roughly?
Sometimes I've got 18, I've got 37 members, and half of them participate on any given Thursday. It's not like the same people are coming. It's a mixture of, so they're fully engaged.
And I would suggest, Bethany, in cases like that, you have somebody dedicated from your team to look for the opportunities to interaction so that you can focus on facilitating whatever it is, whether it's a speaker and then Q&A, or whether it's a speaker that allows questions in between, or whether you want to use the chat to capture the questions, to present the ones that don't overlap each other to the speaker so that they can address it. In each way, you have a different way of engaging. Let me go back now, and we're talking about the goal to fully engage. And the goal of any person should never be to find a group you like and comfortably sit back, just observing from the back row, as it were. The goal should be to fully engage in the group's mission. And sometimes that's going to be more challenging than others based on personalities, based on what the event is or the subject. But it's engaged members who support and advance the whole purpose and mission that we are here for in TRIO. Engaged people are passionate people. You can feel the passion in this room differently than you can in an average group. You know what the mission is, you serve in it, and live it out. I mean, that's why you are the president of your chapters or a leader in that chapter. They're passionate enough about it that they reach out and share what they've found. And that's where your new members are coming from, that invitation. And they're not being invited to come sit and listen. They're being invited to participate in that passionate engagement. So over the long term in a chapter, you can accomplish more with 30 engaged members. God, wouldn't you wish you had 30 engaged members, right? Than with 300 disengaged attendees. And as we've seen too often, the disengaged group will dwindle and eventually die. And we do have chapters that happens to. These 30 engaged members will advance the mission and never stay the same. And that gives life to that chapter. And so let's share 7 ways of growing engagement in the chapters. And this is just a montage of some pictures of different things that have engaged people from different chapters, different events, from Maryland down in the lower right-hand corner in the really great education event they have every year. I mean, they get 500 people. And those people are engaging with each other. They're attending multiple workshops, and having sat through those workshops, they're not sitting back and just absorbing it. They're asking questions. They're contributing their own personal experiences. It's a very engaging event, even with 500 people. Now, the question you would have from Marty and Michelle is, how are you going to do that in the COVID world? And they're working that out, and maybe in a future meeting, they'll tell us how they eventually solve that. But for right now, that's a great example of what's going on there, whether it's a picnic and a social event or so many other different ways to grow engagement. So first of all, I'd offer, challenge people to serve. And people who serve the mission are people who are engaged in the mission. We have a clear mission statement. Know what it is and get people involved in supporting that. Encouraging people to volunteer may be more important than getting them to join a group. In our chapters, we're finding our healthiest people are not those who are in groups. They're those who serve. People who serve, as a rule, get the mission. They are on a mission, and they love that mission. They're passionate to keep them going, just like you've heard tonight in the various people here who are spending a Thursday evening on a Zoom call, sharing what's going on in their lives and sharing both the frustrations and successes. So our goal is to get everyone into an active team, but only doing teams can feed into a self-centered agenda in the same way as sitting back passionately in the meeting and not engaging the mission is a bit of a selfish approach for TRIO members. I personally have made that mistake with a number of people. They were very passionate about something in their lives, and I thought this passionate person would be great for our chapter or on a national board. And boy, was that a mistake, because honestly, they were so focused on their private mission, be it music, be it, I can think of about 3 different examples of people came in and they never adapted the TRIO mission. They saw this as a way of advancing their mission, and they didn't last long, to be honest about it. So groups can be about you, whereas serving is almost never about you. While everyone should be active in a group, but if a group is all you do, it can feed into that consumer frenzy that we see so often in our North American culture. So in your chapter, any thoughts of how you can increase that engagement through that challenging people to serve? I'm going to take an opportunity with each one of these 7 to maybe have 1, 2, or 3 people think about how you can apply that. And so we're going to manage that time-wise, but at the same time, give you an opportunity. So would anybody like to share how you think you can get people more challenged to be engaged and serve? Either you're doing it today or you're saying, that's a good idea. I ought to do something more in that line. Marty and Michelle, the 2 of you, I think, are prime examples of getting people engaged, and you challenge people to serve. You've got a lot of people involved in doing things, not just sitting back. I mean, when I go to that event, you must have 30 people out there working, serving that event. They are engaged. They're passionate. You can feel it. They just reach out to everybody coming. How do you do that?
Well,
it's a secret.
We pay most of them all. We pay well, first of all, very well.
Well, for the conference, we have very good partners, as I mentioned before, with our OPO and our 2 transplant centers. So for something like the conference, we get a lot of volunteers and, to help at the front desk, to welcome people in, to manage tables, to be the facilitator in our speakers room, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very easy there. I think most people would have an easy time with that when you're having, a larger event.
But just having a larger event and you've got a lot of volunteers, what are you doing that's making them want to volunteer? I mean, they could just come and enjoy the event. Why do they want to work the event with you?
Well, like I said, our partners, they're all in either the donation or transplantation business. So that's part of their life, either because that's their profession or because they've experienced a transplant, either being a living donor or a caregiver or have a recipient themselves or someone in their family. So they have that interest and they have the desire for the education that conference brings with 15 speakers on 15 different topics for it to be successful and well attended. So they put the effort into it. They already have that connection up front. There are people already that are committed in some way to, what we're trying to do.
Well, I'm going to suggest there's one more thing that you didn't mention, and that is between the 2 of you, you are an inspiration with your own passion, that people feel that inspiration and want to be part of your team. And that's my observation from my visits down to your event and much broader than that. So that's
Jim, you're really buttering up people tonight.
No, I don't mean to do that. I'm not doing that on purpose. I mean, you can glow in that if you want, but I'm really drawing from you very concrete ways of supporting what we're saying here. And you do it well, both of you do.
I think the other thing, Jim, that's overlooked often is we model ourselves after the people that we serve. And if you look at UMMC and their history and Johns Hopkins, and personally our OPO Living Legacy, these people are not slackers. They put out the quality product of Champions, and we try to mimic it. We try to come up with great topics with great speakers. And we treat everyone like like they're human beings, if it's pre or post. So, we try to make them feel like they're part of the family.
Mike, out there in Kansas City, how do you get so many people out for your Merle Jam, for example? I know it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of music, it's a lot of social thing, but you've got volunteers in your group that are very passionate. How do you do that?
Well, I think they all enjoy giving back. And number two, since it is a music venue, they all enjoy the music, whether it's the country or the blues and the soul and the other things that come through in the jazz. But Merle Zuhl, who was our past president and the founder of Trio in Kansas City back in 2010, does a really good job of putting this on. And he's been doing it now. This will be the 14th year. He just celebrated his 14th year as a heart transplant. So we just have a passion. When Merle Jam time comes up, which is May 1st, by the way, this year at Knuckleheads in Kansas City, it used to be, still is a biker bar. It's an outdoor venue and an indoor venue all mixed into one big gigantic place. But anyway, he brings in acts, and we have 3 stages of music going on the whole time. They serve liquor, they serve food. So we don't just get the transplant people in there. We get the biker crowd. We get the hot rod crowd. We get the people that just enjoy music, and they come out and they dance. You have anything where people can come and listen to music, and good music put on by professionals, and when it makes them move their feet, then you're doing a good job. And of course it lasts till midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, or however long it gets to go this year. Last year we had to cut it off early because of COVID constraints. But this year I think we're going to be able, they're starting to relax some of the rules. So I think we'll be able to go longer. We might make it till 3 o'clock in the morning again. But our Trio group, we like to go out and support it. Number one, we buy the ticket. We go out, we buy the Merle Jam shirts because we like to wear them around and show off, hey, we went to this and it was cool, because Merle's always got a big heart design on it. Number two, the reason we do it is to raise money for the foundation that supports the transplant people in our hospital. So it's a win-win, triple win combination, and I think that's why we're just passionate about it. We really like to do it and get it, and it's a good time. Everybody always comes away saying, hey, that was great. Let's do it again, even better next year.
I would guess to say that the most successful events are those that people can work hard at and have fun at, and that's certainly one of them. Lorinda, you wanted to share? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I spend like 3 hours a day on Zoom, so I'm all the time unmuting. But I just wanted to say, I put it in the chat, but Trio Maryland really was an inspiration to me, because the way they handled their social media and just, the whole model that they have is excellent. And that's exactly who I look up to in regards to, if you look at chapters, that to me, if you want to see what best practices have been and what they're doing, it is Trio Maryland. So.
Okay. Bethany was just showing me that it's going on 9 o'clock. I think this meeting is planned till 9:30, so you know it's 90 minutes.
No, I was just saying 8 hours on Zoom. She said 3 hours on Zoom today. I was saying 8 hours on Zoom today.
It's a Zoom culture, aren't it?
Soon to be 9.
All right. Hey,
and you're right in 2 minutes.
Item number 2, and this seems so obvious, and yet when you think about it, it's something you can improve on and provide a clear path toward involvement. And that is a challenge for many people who participate in any organization, is that they don't know what to do to get involved. And we just assume, because we've been involved for years, that of course they know how. And so what do you do with that new person who asks about or comes to a meeting or whatever, to move them from that attendance into engagement and sharing the passion you feel? If you look at chapter websites, you very seldom see, and I've got to be honest, just in the recent evolution of our Trio Philadelphia website, we put right up front a very interesting way of calling for engagement as opposed to just a factually based website. And so often during meetings, we list 12 things people can do to get more involved in their chapter and in the Trio mission. With too many choices, most people choose nothing. And so focusing on, I have to admit, my early days with Trio in any organization was always to have a good business agenda. And we followed the agenda, and we had all these committee reports, and we had all these things we did. And people, got involved in some of them, but a lot of people just didn't get involved because there was too many. And so I evolved in my own passion to really make sure that one thing or two things were totally engaging and focused on. And so if I could get away from that meeting with people being actively involved in those few programs, that was the goal. And so instead of too many choices, people choosing nothing, give them something clear and simpler, a path toward engagement. The more people will travel. At every level, try to take the confusion away and simply help people engage. You want to make sure they don't feel that your group is a closed clique, which is something that people sometimes feel. They're new, they're left out, as opposed to they're engaged, they're drawn back in. And so from the very front of the meeting, making that language clear and direct, how can you apply that concept in your own chapter? Anybody?
Lorinda here. I've been lucky because I started this during a pandemic. So my experience is on Zoom. And my experience is that Oklahoma is really spread out and we have people that come to our meetings on Zoom. And so that's what they know. And so when we start doing things, it will be in 2 different areas in Oklahoma. And so it's really that engagement electronically. And we don't have a click thing going on. We're lucky because of how we started. So we're kind of the new people,
That click thing is probably something that happens more in an in-person meeting because people know each other, join together, they're like a coffee clutch. Whereas in a Zoom meeting, it's more equitable and everybody gets the same size window and opportunity. So you don't really know who knows who. You don't have that side conversation. So in every one of these challenges we face, there are opportunities. And so, Bethany, if you're sitting through 8 hours of Zoom a day, I can't imagine you sitting through this one too. But it's technology that enables us to go beyond the geography of our immediate location. I mean, Trio Manhattan, I went over there one time and I really got to realize how challenging it was for them. In the city, they had to move from one side of the city to the other. And we're talking city, it's an island almost, right? And it's not very wide. But when they moved from the Red Cross blood bank area that started charging them for meeting space, they reestablished the relationship with the OPO. This goes back a number of years ago. Maybe Bethany was before you. And people said, oh, I can't go to that meeting. It's too far away. Well, if you go to LA, that chapter has the challenge of California's distancing. San Francisco, when I went out there and we had a national meeting and conference, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't take much distance in San Francisco to be too far. And all of a sudden, with this technology of Zooming, you can be any place. And you don't have to travel at night. You don't have to pay the tolls. You don't have to worry about parking. You don't have to worry about safety in a dark alley to get your cars out next to that OPO in Manhattan, as an example. You're here. And when we're through, hey, you don't get in a cold car and drive home and you just turn it off. So there's benefits and drawbacks to all of this. So let's take a look at the third. And that is focus all your programs around your mission. One of the things that often happens, you get people, everybody's got a different idea of what to do. And you say, that's a good idea, we should do that. But you don't filter it against the real purpose of what mission Trio has, what your chapter is all about. And as a result, you end up getting so many different things going on that are not mission related. And therefore, it sounds good, but it's not Trio. And so while many people are passionate about their own personal interests, you need to focus them on the Trio mission. And that's what you're there about. And that's the problem. Too many members get passionate about their mission and not the Trio mission. If you want people to be passionate about the central mission of your chapter, only do programming that directly advances the central mission. So when you say no to 100 other missions, you say yes to the most important mission. How can you do this in your chapter? Do you have that issue? Is this something that you could make a difference by doing something different?
I read our primary purpose before every meeting.
I'm sorry, you reestablish that purpose. What?
I read it. I read the primary purpose at every meeting. Before we start a meeting, what is our primary purpose? And
Good. And that keeps the boundaries where they should be. Anybody else? Okay, let's take a look at number 4 then. He said, come on. Number 4 is make it uncomfortable to stay disengaged. You want the people out there to conform to expectations. People want to do what's expected of them. So make them understand that you are an engaged group. You're there for a purpose. You're there to do things, not sit back and just observe. When you have a presenter, for example, how do you turn that into an engaged, action-based topic as opposed to just an educational topic? I got to tell you that our Trio chapter meetings in Philadelphia, especially when we were doing it at the OPO, we always had a speaker, but the longer part of the meeting was usually after the speaker got finished and we got into Q&A, we got the sharing between everybody, and everybody got engaged in what was going on. So it wasn't, okay, the speaker's finished, thank you very much, goodbye. But rather, now we got engaged. And what was really fun, we used to have 2 different groups, one which was heart-based, and then it merged into a Trio meeting afterwards. And we've had the heart surgeon supporter there as a speaker. And he said, can I stay for this other meeting? Sure. And we had the most entertaining time with the behind the scenes stories of the heart surgeon's life and over the many years there in Philadelphia. So people rise and descend according to our level of expectations. Same is true of organizations. When you don't expect people to do more than attend your meeting, don't be surprised if all they do is attend the meeting. Craft a culture through your words, calls to action at meetings, and all your communications where you expect people to serve. Join a group, bring a friend, give generously. And so how can you do that in your world? Very important. Something that's often overlooked. Any thoughts? Bethany, focusing on this, on the mission on a slide at the beginning of each meeting is an excellent way to keep that focus.
I think you have 2 different meetings in a sense, because you can have one that's a speaker meeting, and then you have the engagement, and then you have one that's just a transplant member meeting. I mean, you could have several different meetings, and not every meeting is going to be the same meeting. And I think that people stop going sometimes because they're like, well, it's going to be Bob, but he's going to be talking all night long, and it's always Bob on there. And so it's how do you re-engage people?
Good point. Anybody else have any ideas that you want to take back to your chapter, or you can demonstrate? Marty, you got something to share there?
The one thing that we've talked about for the 8 years that we've been around is how we are individually strong in our strengths. We really never talk about how we can help one another. And now what I'm talking about there, maybe we ought to take some of the strengths of each chapter and share them. For instance, I've always wanted a peer-to-peer support group. I've never had members in our group who wanted to dedicate a day a week that somebody could call in and talk to. Here, Lorinda already does something like that. Maybe she's not as strong as putting together a Saturday morning meeting where she needs a really high tech, doctor to explain it. Maybe we are doing that meeting that weekend. Maybe she broadcast our meeting in her chapter. So maybe we can share some of that information and have some common goals that we can get stronger at. But we get on this meeting once a year and we talk about how things are going, what will we do, and what does Marty do, and what does Lorinda do, or what does Bill do. Maybe we ought to take some of that and pull it together.
Good idea. Pat and Chris actually do that between the two Ohio chapters. They're bootstrapping each other with their strengths to help Pat deal with some of the challenges she shared earlier. And given the technology, it's not like when you had to drive up to Philadelphia to learn what we were doing up here, or we drove down to your meetings to see what was going on down there. I don't mean your educational meetings. I mean when we had chapter meetings down there and we had that great crab cakes. Oh my God, I still remember those. With this technology, all of those barriers are removed. So that's a great idea. We should explore that through the chapter council meetings and see if we can come up with some synergy. Again, if you have access to resources, speakers, for example, that are powerful speakers that another chapter doesn't have, oh yeah, we can't have speakers because we don't have the two hospitals you have next to you down there. Well, hey, we'll have our speaker on the Zoom event and you invite other people to it. Great idea. We do that sort of with the Transplant Presentation Library. When a chapter, for example, can record one of those sessions and we add it, that's shared a little bit differently. But I like your idea better, Marty. If we could have that kind of partnership, that would be really special. A good way to use the technology today, the challenge we have of isolation, and turn it into a positive.
And Jim, and it could be just something as simple as Sam's meeting last night. I didn't see that invitation until today. But imagine Sam having a meeting that he only had a couple guests, but there were 20 other TRIO members on that meeting, kind of talking about all the good things that have happened at the meetings and that over the years. It's kind of a good reinforcement to help somebody get started.
Amen. Yes, Amy.
I have something about that. I know Marty had posted about one of their meetings where they had one of the physicians talking. He had posted that onto the TRIO Greater Cleveland Facebook page. I actually attended that meeting, which was a fabulous meeting. So I was grateful to have him post that because it gave me that opportunity to join them for that meeting. So it was great. It was a great meeting as well, by the way.
And Amy, thanks for the note. I appreciated it.
Okay. Moving on to number 5, talk action, not knowledge. Chapter leaders have this incredible 60 to 90 minute meeting window with which to speak into people's lives every monthly meeting, for example. You can use it to give people information, or you can use it to call people to action. That second is far better. And so I found myself challenged over time as I was sharing information, either through a newsletter or even an agenda, to add something to that agenda item that said, all right, this is the subject. Here's the challenge. Here's the action challenge to go with it. And I have to admit that over time, sometimes you sort of you lose that focus. And yet it was a very powerful way to really bring people into a subject that was passive and make it very active, that they can be engaged with. Now, you don't need to hammer people every time, but with your words, you can make it clear that the goal of the chapter is not just to know something, but to do something with what you know. So if you continue to talk about how to get involved and join the mission, providing clear action steps and opportunities to do so, eventually more people engage. If you don't, they won't. So do it. So how can you use this idea of talking action, not knowledge, in your chapter? Anybody? As I just shared, the way I did it was in the agenda that went out, there was every subject had an action. Why was this important to you? what would we want you to do differently, or what could you take away from that particular agenda item, let's say. Okay.
I think there's something to be said for, if it's an action item, setting a date that you want to get it done.
Yeah. We had an interesting meeting this afternoon with the Communications Committee at the national level. And as we were discussing a lot of things, it really worked out very nicely. And then Steve piped up at the end, and I always try and give everybody a chance to say something at the end that I wasn't focused on or hadn't thought of, and maybe it's in the back of their mind. And Steve said, all right, well, given what we've just decided we're doing, what's the timeline? What's the schedule? Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, all those ideas became a real nice plan of action. And I had to say to Steve, thank you for that. And so the agenda for the follow-on meeting, which was sequel to that, all has a timeline schedule of dates by which certain things are done that lead to the final result, all action-based items. And that was a great question you asked there, Steve. Anybody else before we move on to number 6, which is somewhat similar. So let me bounce to it. And try using active language. And this is talking about changing the language of engagement from more passive language to active language. So for example, for years, you've heard these 4 single words to explain the model of our chapters. Connect, we try to connect people to the subgroups. Serve, to the volunteers. Invite, to invite a friend to a meeting, whatever. Give, to donate. In place of those, we can use new language, which conveys the same steps, and adding yet a 5th one, become a member, an active word as opposed to the earlier one. Join the mission instead of just serve. Bring a friend. Each word indicates action. Choose community, that was connect before. And finally, give generously, which was just give before. And so the idea is that these phrases, we very naturally use them, but they paint a clearer outcome toward deeper engagement with the mission than the old language that we are so used to using. We imagine a day when many more people become engaged TRIO members, join the mission, bring friends, choose community, and give generously. That kind of action changes the culture, and it becomes a culture of action. Whatever language you use, make sure it conveys the outcome you long for. And so thinking of your own chapter, again, how would you try using active language as a leader in your chapter? Any thoughts on that? Or do you already do that? When you've gotten through with a topic, do you turn around and turn that into some type of action? Or do you say, okay, our next agenda item is whatever it is? Anybody? Go ahead, Sam.
So not about active words, but I think we can use surveys to better serve the people who are thinking even about becoming members. So ask with surveys, ask what type of things do they want to engage in, talk about, and how do they want to help other people through the mission of TRIO.
And I want you to know I did not pay Sam to do that, but in our communication committee meeting just 2 hours ago, well now 4 hours ago, we were planning for our next national TRIO survey. The last one we did is 2009. And so to get an update and engage as many members as we can into giving us feedback on the services we provide, on their ideas, and also to get a profile of what our organization looks like in terms of types of organs, how many years you've been involved post-transplant, how many years you've been involved with TRIO, whether you've been a leadership within TRIO. I mean, it's now, we've come to realize about 10 years would be a good time to redo that. So over the next month or 2, that survey is being planned, and we're going to ask every one of you to be the chapter advocates for making sure that your chapter members, one, are aware of it, because a lot of our e-news is coming out through constant contact, and we can see who opens up one of those issues and who doesn't. And there's a lot of people that don't open up for any number of reasons. And so to get that survey into the hands of people, we're going to hopefully get your chapters to make sure that you pass it along for those that don't see it in the e-news, and give them the link to fill out the survey so we can have a representative sample of the 1,600 constant cognitive issues that we send out every month. So that will be coming. And Sam, thank you for even mentioning that, because I meant to mention it and almost forgot it. Finally, the last one. And that is something that we often forget about, and that is reward the progress. However you define increased engagement, the idea is reward it whenever you can. Right here, you see Roger Goodacre, and this is down at one of those Trio Maryland conferences. And Roger is one of those quiet guys that is actively engaged. And it's a pleasure to be able to see him down there and in different ways to acknowledge that engagement. Whoops, let's see if I can go back. Here we go. And so how can you do this? First, you can celebrate it publicly. And I didn't put this up there to blow smoke at Marty here. It just happened to be a good picture to illustrate what we're talking about here. And when he gets up with his green tie and his suit, he looks sharp as hell. And he gets up there and he really acknowledges and celebrates the people who make it all possible and the leaders of his chapter, especially that event. So sometimes leaders are great at asking, but they're not at reporting back afterwards. So if you ask for volunteers, you get 5 new ones. Make a point of celebrating it at the next meeting. Tell some stories, shoot some videos, thank the people. Also, when people give generously or bring a friend, or when new people join, celebrate it. Pretend it's Transplant or Donor Anniversary Month and celebrate those milestones. And so another way you can do it privately. And that means a lot to people also. So when you see somebody jump in, just saying thank you. It's amazing how many people would be blown over by somebody just stopping and saying, hey, really appreciate what you did. I saw you do whatever, whether it was reaching out to somebody or pitching in on something, and to say thank you. So you mention it when you talk to them after the meeting event. Thank them in the next email you send them. Or you want to do something really unusual these days, handwrite a thank you card or note. Imagine the wow when they get a piece of mail that's not a bill, but it's that simple note that just says a few words. I mean, when did you last get a handwritten card or mail? They're getting rarer and rarer all the time. And so finally, another way to do this is celebrate with your key leaders. Trio leaders can easily fall in the trap of rewarding attendance, but not engagement. To increase engagement, start celebrating how many people signed up after that, than how many people just showed up. When you talk about steps and celebrate when people take them, great things happen in any organization, but especially our Trio chapters with so many amazing milestones that we can celebrate. So staff and key volunteers need to know when they're winning. Help them see it. I mean, I was talking to somebody in Novartis just the other day, and she said, well, I'm just a simple person, you know, there's nothing special. I said, wait a minute, I got to push back on that, because at that point in the conversation, I knew I had a special person at the other end. And when I got through acknowledging that and pointing out why I said that, the reaction of the other one is, wow, I never quite thought of that. Thank you. And talk about building a relationship. I mean, we all have in our organizations those people that are low key. And when you acknowledge that and affirm what they're doing, it can be very impactful. So signing up is a lot better than just showing up. And so thinking about all those ways, how can you bring that into your chapter activity? Anybody? We're obviously getting closer to that 90-minute mark of the Zoom, but Pat, go ahead.
Make it fun. Make your meetings not boring. Bring some life to them. As you said, celebrate like it was May Day or something, you know? It's just, people don't want to go and just sit in a room or just sit on Zoom. You have to have some excitement to get their interest up.
Very good. And, you know, maybe as a leader, you have so much going on. Maybe that's one of those things you can get somebody else to engage in, to be the celebration person, if you will, the one who gathers everybody's birthdays, transplant anniversaries, donation anniversaries, whatever, and brings that to the party when that next event comes up, and you acknowledge that person for celebrating their end anniversary of their transplant, for example. Great idea, Pat. Thank you. And make it fun. You're right. Sometimes that can just be a fun thing. Yes, Sam.
I was going to say celebrate if it's a monthly meeting, do birthdays or anniversaries.
Okay. Lorinda?
I understand about the celebration and getting people, rah, but there's also conversations you have that people don't have about people that are pre-transplant that don't make the transplant list. I mean, those are engaging conversations that people go, I felt that way, and no one wants to say it out loud. And I know I actually went up to our hospital the other day and went to our social worker because I knew she couldn't say no to my face. I knew that if I text her, that she's more likely to say no. So I went up there and I wanted to see one of our members. And, she walked me to his room. Then she poked her head back in. I never did this. And I said, okay, But his mom said that he had talked more in 5 days. He's been in the hospital from me coming up and showing the encouragement and things like that. And that is what I think that we need as, in our organizations, on a chapter level, is that kind of, that's a feel good thing. It's not necessarily a rah, but that's something that touches people. So
there's a balance to all this, and there's multiple things here. So don't misrepresent what I said there in terms of everything is a fun celebration. It's not. And so Bill, for example, is reigniting something in our Philadelphia chapter that we used to do in terms of visiting patients on the floor of a hospital. And Marty has been doing that down, in a day when many chapters say, oh, we can't do that because of HIPAA. Well, better not tell Marty that, because he's got doctors asking to come in and visit the patients on a regular basis. Marty, how are you getting around that HIPAA restriction that so many people use as an excuse?
Well, let me back up for 1 second. Lorinda, you mentioned you went into a hospital. Are the hospitals open in your state?
Yeah, they let me come in. Yeah, they were open.
Not here.
I mean, they're not open.
Right.
So I wasn't supposed to go up there, but the social worker took me there.
That was pretty cool, because we're still shut down. But no, over the years, I've done it for so long now. For 6 years, I've seen 1,600 people face to face over the years. And what we did was this summer, we took it virtual. The hospital gave me a program. They did 4 different kinds of programs, a cooking one about pets. I forget the third one. And then there was me, Talk Transplant. But to get the patient to actually get on a Zoom at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to talk to a guy who's 12 years out, I don't think always enthused everybody. So in a matter of 16 weeks of trying a virtual program, we only had 2 visitors. So as I speak, we pulled the program, and Hopkins and I are working on another idea now. But virtually is a very tough gig when you don't have the opportunity of that face-to-face.
Now, Bill, you need to be talking to Marty also, because he's overcoming some of the challenge you're facing with the social workers and the programs and in this day of confinement, et cetera. And so this is a very powerful action and engagement opportunity for TRIO chapters. And sometimes you need to realize other people are doing it in order to realize that, yeah, despite the barriers, it can be done. And yes, even when you can't go in the hospital, actually, that's a more powerful thing, Marty, because often when I would go visit patients, for example, that's a 45-minute drive. It's a $5 bridge toll. You get down there and, oh, guess what? He's down having dialysis and won't be back for 2 hours. Oh, geez, was there somebody else I can see? Well, no, we don't have anybody else right now. After a while, you realize you waste a lot of time and money with no accomplishment. Whereas the virtual, you're doing it from home. You're not having the expense. And Bill, are you making any progress in getting that whole virtual program working for you there in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so I've had meetings, and our program is going to officially launch on Monday, March 8th. And initially the social workers were like, well, we'll talk to our patients and we'll have them schedule an appointment to talk with you and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, listen, it really doesn't work that way, because then you're looking at matching up times with people. I said, here's how I was doing it in the real world. If I had X amount of time, I would be in the hospital and I would visit the floors that I know that I could talk to patients on. And I would go and the nurses would know, hey, Bill's here, let's have him talk to so-and-so. And it's kind of like a spur of the moment thing. And timing is everything. It's not like you schedule an appointment. So I'm saying, I'm giving you a block of time. You go to the floors and let the nurses know that I'm going to be available at this time. And then they're going to take iPads around to their patients, because they have this whole thing with blue jeans and all of their hoops that we have to jump through. And basically I'm saying, this is my time allotted. You find people that fit in this time. And you know, it's got to be a spur of the moment. Let's not set up an appointment days in advance. And I said, most of my success is I'm asking people who weren't really even asking to speak with someone. I was just saying, hey, I'm here. You want to talk to me? And that's the direction that we need to drive this. And the social workers, you know, they were driving it from the standpoint of, oh, well, we need to have an appointment and then we should have a survey to follow up. I go, no, 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 no. This is how it has to work. So finally they go, okay, you know, as a volunteer, you tell us what time and then we'll fit that. So I'll be interested to see how that all comes together and certainly let you know. But I think it's a better approach than trying to arrange times for people, right?
As the salesperson, you never ask the question, does he want it? You ask him how many he wants.
Yeah.
And basically, Bill, I did the same thing. I would start in room 1. Hello there, I'm Marty Marin. I'm a volunteer. I'm going to make sure you're having a nice morning. Oh, by the way, would you like to talk about it?
Yeah.
So I never gave them the option until I had a chance to introduce myself and tell them what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So that's exactly right. It's not a scheduling job.
Again, great examples of passionate engagement. And we opened up with the question of, why are you still attending events? Why are you still active in TRIO? And I think you can gauge from what you've heard from the various people why. They're passionate about what they have to offer. They're driven by gratitude. For example, if you've got a transplant and you don't know who the donor was, how do you say thank you? Through action. And if you have TRIO, you have an opportunity that you probably couldn't create yourself. And so our overall message today, and let me just summarize it with one last screen. And this is the challenge screen that I talked about before. And that is, how does this all apply to you? How can you change your chapter's engagement with these ideas? And what actions are you taking away from tonight's event? So I want you to just give a thought now. You don't have to share anything right now, because we've had a lot of sharing back and forth. But I do want a quiet 60 seconds for you to reflect on what you've heard tonight, what people have shared, and why you're engaged and how you can get others to be equally engaged. So with that, I'm going to shut up for 60 seconds, and I ask you just to reflect on that. "60 seconds is a long time when you're used to talking a lot." But I just want to point out, hey, where'd Steve go? Where are you, Steve? Steve,
I'm here.
you see that picture on the screen?
Yes.
That's Patty. What's the story behind what looks like a very Japanese audience of fun people? And Patty is down at the end of that one table in her, looks like maybe her TRIO shirt, I hope. Any idea what the story is behind this?
Not a clue.
Okay. Well, that's an example of a chapter engagement. And obviously she had quite an audience there. And for some reason or other, they all look Japanese to me. Well, maybe a couple on the right don't. So there's a story behind that. And Patty has been very engaged. And most of our chapters, their engagement involves getting out into the community, and sharing the need for organ donation, which is again key to our mission, advocating for organ donation, advocating for patients through public policy and Roger's public policy group, writing to legislators to get important legislation passed, as just recently happened. And so I hope that with the thoughts we had shared today, that you can go back and not be so focused on how many people are showing up, but rather how many people are engaged. And those that aren't showing up, how can you get them to come and get engaged so that they do show up? So the engagement is the key before the showing up almost. And those people who are passionately engaged are those people who are saying to their friends, hey, you ought to come to our meetings because we really do things out there. And it's a lot of fun. And so with that, I'll give anybody an opportunity to raise their hand and say anything they want. Steve, go ahead.
Jim, after giving some thought to that picture, I think what it represents or what it is Stanford Medical School invites a group of Japanese medical students to Alto every couple of years. And I believe one of their days is devoted to transplant. And a number of our trio members have gone and spoken to the Japanese students. And I think that's what it's from.
And just to put that in perspective, talk about being engaged. Steve has been involved with our Japanese chapter and has an ongoing relationship and dialogue with the former spouse of the Japanese chapter president, Yushi Nomura. And she is English-speaking American who's living in Japan. And so our international Transplant Recipients International Organization has that chapter. And sometime we should have an opportunity to share what they do, because they do something we don't do. And by law, we can't do it. And that is provide money for patients, even though the need is there. That's not our mission. But in Japan, they raise literally millions of dollars, especially for children, to come to the United States and get transplants. So the current president over there has a young daughter who received a heart transplant here in the United States. And the challenge we have is he speaks Japanese, not English. We speak English and not Japanese. And Karen actually has a daughter who could do the translation. And when you use Google to translate that language, it doesn't really do it as accurately as sometimes needed. But one of Steve's engagements is keeping an open relationship with our international chapter in Japan. Steve, I really appreciate you sharing that conversation the other day, and maybe someday we can have a focus here of just that part of it.
Yes.
So anybody else that has anything they'd like to say, just raise your hand. Otherwise, the meeting is going to be over. Rose, good to see you. Pat, Amy,